Several survivors were bound next to the water tank, awaiting a pig-like slaughter. They listened to the man beside them sharpening his knife with a menacing sound, filling their hearts with fear. Another man stood behind, wielding a baseball bat and gesturing. In the previous episode, Rick and the others who were captured were brought to this place. The massacre began from left to right. The sight sent chills down the remaining survivors' spines. Is today going to end like this? The way they killed people was no different from slaughtering pigs. Glenn was the fifth in line, feeling restless and uneasy. Rick remained composed on the surface, but the weapon hidden in his pant leg had already slipped into his hand. What he needed now was time. At that moment, Gareth walked in. He came to register the amount of ammunition used by his subordinates. Glenn watched as the person next to him fell, realizing that his turn was next. The brutality of this method of death was terrifying beyond imagination. Just as the man was about to strike, the other man might have been firing a gun for the first time. He can't remember how many shots he took. It also kept Glenn alive. At that moment, Bob made a desperate whimpering sound, indicating his desire to talk to Gareth. For him, death itself wasn't terrifying. It was the fear of waiting for death. Bob anxiously pleaded, "Please, there's no need for this. We can resolve this peacefully. We have a companion who knows how to cure the zombie virus. He has a solution. Just send him to Washington. There's really no need to do this. We can save the world and restore it to its former state." Gareth shook his head and forcefully stuffed the cloth back into Bob's mouth. Even if it were possible to return the world to its previous state, he wasn't willing to do so. Then, he removed the cloth from Rick's mouth and asked, "We saw you carrying a bag into the woods, but it was missing when you arrived here. We couldn't find it. What was inside?" Rick stared blankly at him, not uttering a word. Gareth didn't show anger but instead pulled out a dagger. He forcefully dragged Bob closer, indicating that if he didn't speak now, Bob would meet a gruesome death. Gareth had already guessed that the bag contained numerous weapons, which were Rick's backup plan. Rick compromised and said, "I'll take you to it. See for yourself what's inside." His intention was to assess if there was any chance for a counterattack. However, Gareth wasn't fooled. Instead, he pointed the dagger at Bob's eye. Rick then spoke up, revealing the contents of the bag: an AK-47 rifle, an automatic rifle with night vision, a compound bow, and a red-handled machete. Speaking of which, Rick said he was going to kill him with this knife. Gareth chuckled. Finding Rick's threat absurd, he considered them all lambs awaiting slaughter and saw their attempt to kill him as delusional. Without further ado, he gagged Rick again. Gareth stood up, preparing to leave, and ordered his henchmen to put them in the drying machine within 2 hours. In the coming days, they would feast on their flesh. The two henchmen quickly agreed to carry out the orders. At that moment, several gunshots could be heard from outside. Gareth quickly inquired about the source, but it didn't hinder the executioner from continuing the massacre. Just as they were about to strike again, more gunshots echoed through the air. This distraction presented an excellent opportunity for the group. What the hell is going on here? It all started a few hours ago. Tyrese and Carol, delayed on their journey, had only just arrived near the final destination. Suddenly, they heard movement from the forest behind them. It turns out to be a zombie and Carol rushes in and kills it with a single slash. However, as she stood up, she discovered a horde of zombies emerging from the woods. Not daring to stay, they quickly picked up Judith and rushed to the other side of the forest, taking cover behind a slope to observe the zombies' movements. What they didn't expect was for the zombies to start coming in their direction. Just as they were about to retreat further, the sound of fireworks and gunshots erupted in the distance. The zombies immediately changed their course, following the railroad tracks. A few minutes later, all the zombies had been lured away from their location. Being cautious, the two speculated. Either someone is attacking the end station or the end station is attacking someone else. It is necessary to find out what this is all about. Otherwise, lives could be lost. In front of a small house, a man was setting up fireworks with the intention of luring the zombies away from Terminus. As he arranged the fireworks, he engaged in conversation with his teammates, mocking the woman with the knife and claiming she thought she was a warrior. He even mentioned his plans to draw blood from the boy wearing a hat. Suddenly, a gun was pressed against his head, and the person behind it was none other than Carol and Tyrese. They had overheard his derogatory remarks and discovered that Michonne and Carl were in their custody. The man tried to defend himself, saying they could have whatever they wanted, and that their group welcomed everyone, but Carol wasn't interested in his empty words. They promptly tied up the man and threw him into the house. He stated that your men went to the terminal and attacked us and that's why they were arrested. They were acting in self-defense. Carol, however, didn't believe a word he said. The man continued, explaining that he had come out to divert the zombies, which would benefit everyone, but Carol countered that the zombie horde was actually making its way to the Terminus. She expressed that she didn't want to lure them away but instead needed the help of the zombies. Immediately, she packed her things and prepared to go for the rescue. Man taunted her, saying that the place was a fortress and she would be killed before she even got close. Carol didn't respond. She simply instructed Tyrese to watch over the children while she went to kill. The man's words had actually reminded her of something. She decided to disguise herself and blend in with the zombie horde. After a while, Carol arrived at the fence and heard voices coming from below. She looked down and saw Rick and the others being tied up and taken away. Judging by the situation, they were definitely in a bad place. Carol didn't rush to open fire. Instead, she changed her position. Some of the zombies had already reached the Terminus. She put down her sniper rifle and picked up the 8x magnification scope on her rifle to observe the situation. Several women were inside the fence, killing zombies. What she hadn't expected was that there was a gas cans next to it, with a large number of men inside, and it was useless to shoot 1 or 2 people rashly. At this moment, the women started screaming as countless zombies approached the destination. It was truly a golden opportunity. Carol quickly prepared her cloud-piercing sword and aimed down again. Her goal was to ignite the gas tank and lure the zombies inside. She fired 2 shots without any effect. Fortunately, the 3rd shot successfully punctured the gas tank, releasing highly flammable and explosive gas. Carol quickly ignited the cloud-piercing arrow. Immediately, a massive explosion resounded in all directions. It not only destroyed the fence but also attracted more zombies to come. It was Carol's action that gave Rick and the others a chance to catch their breath. They too were shaken and thrown off balance by the explosion. Gareth realized that something had gone wrong. He quickly ordered the 2 to stay there while he went out to investigate. Rick, taking advantage of this opportunity, frantically cut the ropes. The 2 of them were now unsure whether to go out and provide support or stay to finish the pig slaughter. Just as they were arguing, Rick launched his counterattack. In Rick's hands, the piece of wood became a deadly weapon. The man tries to beg for mercy, but Rick is not the one to go soft. After dealing with the man, Rick quickly untied Daryl and the others. Meanwhile, the sound of gunfire outside continued as hordes of zombies stormed in. Carol, disguised as a zombie, blended in among them. When she noticed someone shooting in their direction, she swiftly slipped into a nearby house and took aim at a distant target. Rick and the others speculated that they were being attacked from outside, which presented them with a perfect opportunity. They armed themselves and prepared to leave. However, they came across a room that left them utterly horrified. It turned out that these madmen treated people like pigs, even using human flesh as their source of food. Without wasting time cursing these monsters, their top priority was to rescue the others. They arrived outside, where a large number of zombies roamed, and some people were shooting and killing them. Assessing the situation, Rick disregarded the objections of others and charged forward. He was determined to find an opportunity to eliminate these people. Soon the men with guns were shooting while walking towards the front. Rick patiently waited for the right moment, until the last person passed by. Finally, he took action, rushing forward to eliminate the man and seizing his rifle, firing frantically towards the front. Meanwhile, Carol entered a room filled with stored items and unexpectedly spotted a familiar wristwatch. It was the one she had given Rick before she left. Next to it was Daryl's crossbow. Could it be that they had already fallen victim to these attackers? Rick had made his way to a shipping container, opening the door and calling for the others to come out quickly. With that, Daryl and the others escaped, eventually climbing over the fence. The battle at the final destination had come to an end. Rick then went to the area where the weapons were kept and there he began to dig quickly. Abraham didn't understand why they needed to stay there. Angered, Rick declared that they would encircle the perimeter and eliminate the remaining people. They didn't deserve to survive. The others looked at each other. Glenn stated that it was over here and there was no need to engage in further bloodshed. Rick strongly condemned the cannibalistic behavior and insisted on killing them all. However, Rosita and Maggie voiced their opposition, believing that the Terminus had already been destroyed, rendering it unnecessary to concern themselves with those people. Although Daryl remained silent, he firmly supported Rick, but at that moment, he turned his head and caught sight of Carol. Daryl rushed towards her, and the two embraced tightly. It had been a long time since they last saw each other. The rest of the group approached with smiles on their faces. Rick, feeling somewhat guilty, asked if it was Carol who had done what happened earlier. Although she didn't say a word, The answer was already apparent. It could be said that Carol's timely return had not only saved Rick's daughter but also rescued Rick and the others. Since the eschatology, her transformation has likely been the greatest among them, from being a wife subjected to domestic violence for years to now venturing alone to the base to rescue people. Carol said to Rick, "Follow me. There's a surprise waiting for you." Subsequently, Carol led a few people to the cabin. Rick went crazy as he rushed forward when he saw Tyrese holding Judith. His daughter was still alive. Tyrese and Sasha hugged each other, feeling the disbelief that they had both thought they had lost each other forever. They never imagined they would reunite today. Rick, in particular, could not imagine who would have saved his child at that time. He was overwhelmed with gratitude towards Tyrese. Finally, Rick decided to leave this place, although he didn't know where to go. The farther away from here, the better. The team set off once again, embarking on the journey to find a sanctuary. Rick covered up the advertising information to prevent other survivors from coming. This is Rick's team. They leaving the Terminus. They don't have a specific destination in mind and just want to get away from this area. At that moment, they hear a distant cry for help. Rick immediately becomes cautious and on guard. Initially, he didn't want to meddle, but with his son urging him, he reluctantly agrees to go and investigate. They find a man trapped on a rock, surrounded by several zombies, frantically pleading for help. Rick and his team swiftly move in, displaying remarkable teamwork, and eliminate all the zombies in less than a minute. The man came down and started throwing up without saying a word, leaving everyone speechless. After recovering, the man expresses his gratitude and introduces himself as Gabriel. During their conversation, they learn that Gabriel has a church nearby and let him lead the way. They've been gone so long. Rick's group decides it's time to find a place to rest. On the way, Gabriel explains that since the eschatology began, he has survived by relying on the supplies at the church and rarely venturing outside. However, he ran out of food, which is why he ran so far. Soon, a distinctively styled church appears before them. Due to Rick's cautious nature in the post-apocalyptic world, he stops Gabriel from opening the door and decides to inspect the church himself. Inside, it's eerily quiet, with no signs of anyone around. Rick meticulously checks every compartment. Apart from the normal church facilities, there doesn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. It appears that Gabriel, the man they encountered, wasn't lying. Rick immediately decides to rest and recuperate in this location. However, Abraham remains focused on their to Washington and disagrees with staying at the church. In the backyard, he discovers a car that can be fixed and used, but Rick's priority was to give his team a break. The original members of the group strongly support Rick. Even Glenn states that they should be in sync with Rick's decisions and can put off going to Washington for a while. Gabriel informs Rick that there is food nearby, but it's infested with zombies, and he's too afraid to go alone. Rick promptly decides to take a team to scavenge for supplies. He finds Carl and tells him that he doesn't fully trust Gabriel, so they'll bring him along on their expedition. Rick suspects that Gabriel might have other companions. He instructs Carl and the rest to remain vigilant and protect his sister while they're away. Rick knows that with a larger group, Son's guard is starting to drop, and he might even be deceived by appearances. After ensuring his son's understanding, Rick and the others set off. While on the road, Bob proposes the idea of heading to Washington, D.C. to Rick. Abraham is also very strong in combat. Eugene's knowledge can help prevent further disasters and restore life to its former state. Bob advises Rick not to become too numb to the world, otherwise it's hard to go back to life as it was before the end of the world. However, Rick simply said that this is now the reality of life. But Bob always believed that Eugene represented the military. He had decided to follow Abraham and the others to Washington. Rick remains silent and does not interfere with the decision of others. Protecting his son and daughter is his first priority. Soon, the group arrives at a store to gather supplies. Although the process is perilous, with Bob being dragged into the water, no one is harmed. Brought back a lot of supplies. Not a bad haul this time. Upon returning to the church, Abraham is busy repairing the car, while Carl notices some strange signs within the church. The windows are marked with knife scratches, indicating someone's strong desire to get inside. In addition, there is a row of inscriptions on the wall that reads, "You will go to hell for this." Carl becomes suspicious of Gabriel after considering his father's words and observing these signs. Night. Everyone gathers around, enjoying the feast they brought back. It has been months since they had a proper meal. and now they can even have a drink or two. Abraham continues to express his thoughts, asking if they want to wake up every day and fight zombies, scavenge for food, and be unable to sleep peacefully at night. Rick knows that Abraham is trying to persuade others to join him in escorting Eugene. Abraham even asks Eugene to explain what Washington has to offer. Eugene clears his throat and says that the military has established a base there, equipped to handle any crisis. They have food, fuel, and shelter, a chance to start over. Everyone contemplates the tempting proposition. No one wants to live in constant uncertainty. Rick looks at his little family and smiles, saying, "I'm in." Upon hearing this, the people around them applaud and cheer. Many members trust Rick's abilities and they are eager to go to the place Eugene described. Rick leading them there would be the perfect solution. Bob's behavior seems peculiar, although he and Sasha have become a couple. However, tonight he seems particularly reluctant to part with her. He walked out of the church alone. After a while, Rick approaches Gabriel. He has never fully trusted him and he spoke softly to him, saying, "You must be hiding something you can't escape. It's your own business, but these people here are my family. If whatever you're hiding will harm them, I will kill you." Gabriel is silent. Meanwhile, Carol had secretly hidden a car in the woods, perhaps contemplating a quiet departure. Suddenly, there was a commotion in the forest, and it was none other than Daryl. He had also noticed Carol's intention to leave. Before he could inquire about her motives, they heard the sound of a car engine. They immediately went on high alert as a vehicle passed by them. Daryl quickly recognized the markings on the car. It was the same one that took Beth. He hurriedly pulled Carol into a car to pursue. Bob was outside alone. Bob smiled as he reminisced about the kiss he shared with Sasha. But as he continued to dwell on those thoughts, his expression quickly turned sorrowful. Then, filled with disappointment, he walked deeper into the forest and leaned against a tree, where he began to weep. Suddenly, a mysterious person knocked him unconscious from behind. When Bob regained consciousness, he found himself face to face with Gareth. Bob glanced around, finally realizing that he had been captured by these people. Gareth prattled on, saying, "I just want you to understand that what happened to you is not personal. We were simply hungry." It was then that Bob noticed that his leg was missing. These bastards had actually eaten his leg. Gareth continued speaking. San put a piece of meat in his mouth and savored it with relish, and remarked that Bob's taste was much better than the others.